church, I've talked about this. This is probably we're not going to talk about this every week for a while, but I want to keep it fresh in your mind. So I'm going to try and come up with some more creative ways than just this one slide. But just reminding you what we're about. We want to share, what a great example Thursday night. There's nothing more basic than sharing a meal with people. And sharing with each other and sharing with people who we are, what we have, with people around us. Now, being in awe of God, I have a lot of thoughts on this. I'm going to hold off a little bit. But we need to get close to Jesus. We need to put as much effort in being close to Jesus and knowing him as we do to wondering if somebody else is close to Jesus. And calling them out on not being as close as we think they should be. Okay? I've been convicted of this recently. So I think we need to do that. Well, let's work on how do we practically find ways to get to know Jesus. And like I said last week, the kids video thing was all about this. And I loved it, like just in a kid's way, like for a fourth grader. How do you get to know Jesus? That was the question. And I was like, wow, that is profound. Theologians have discussed that for centuries. And the kids are like, pray. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that's actually it. Yeah, pray, read the Bible. Talk to him, listen to him. And then we want to be a group that grows. We want to grow in our own walk with God, meaning we want to grow as we continue to follow his commands and we follow the way he calls us to walk and to love people with selflessly, and then grow as a community. Again, I want us to see, I'm just going to say it, I want to see more people here on a Sunday morning. I get there's all sorts of reasons why not, but I think it's on us to invite those people I asked you to pray about last week. Start beginning to talk to those folks and see if they will join you. And they're not going to come because I'm fantastic. They're not even going to come because Peter's fantastic. They're going to come because you're fantastic. And you're not even that fantastic, but the Jesus that you love is, right? So let's share. Today we're going to talk, we're looking at Mark 5. And it's kind of a story. Last week we talked about parables, right? And this idea that Jesus talked in stories, which I love because I'm a storyteller. And sometimes I tell too much story. Not too many. Sometimes I will admit I probably tell stories I shouldn't. I get in the middle of it and realize, oh, either this audience is wrong or this is a story that's probably more of a me story. Like I shouldn't share that with the world. And I share some details maybe that are tangential. But I think the way my mind works, I love a story. Every little kid loves to hear a story. That's why movies are a gazillion-dollar industry. We all love to read and be told a story. I did a little test, a little check, a little data test. We have a thing called Audible. We've had it for years. I don't know how many years we've had Audible, which are audiobooks. Used to be books on tape. Remember books on tape? Right? Some of you remember books on album. Some of you remember books on 8-track. I don't even know if they had that. Books on cylinder. Anyway, the talkies. The point was, I looked in there. We had 295 books in our Audibles. We haven't purchased, a lot of them are free books, but I love to be told a story, and every night when I fall asleep, I listen to an Audible. Sometimes they're ones I shouldn't be listening to, like they're a murder mystery that I'm like, that's good to be in my psyche as I fall asleep. That's probably not super healthy. I used to listen to old-time radio shows that had a lot of screaming, like, sound effects, like, and that would wake me up in the middle of the night terrified. But I love to hear a story. Jesus always talked in stories to illustrate not only what it was like here on earth, but the kingdom of heaven versus the kingdom of earth, and what it meant to follow him, and always to illustrate. And so today I want to tell a little bit of a story. This is a little bit different outline than I normally do. And it's going to require a little more focus on your part. So if you're falling asleep, don't. This is the story with kind of three main characters besides Jesus. And you can see this. It's the story of 3 damaged people restored by Jesus. So here's the story. Last week, Jesus, when he left, got in the boat and went across the lake, went across the sea, because he needed a little space. And he gets to the other side, and as soon as he gets out of the boat, remember the storm? He told the storm to quiet. And so as soon as he gets out of the boat, they are confronted by a man possessed by demons, who's been living in the graveyard. Wow. How about that there's a lot to drill down into that, right? So he gets out, and this guy is well-known, crazy, possessed by demons, living in the graveyard. And the town that he's coming into is, it's a Gentile primarily Gentile town, an area where there's a mix of Gentiles and Jews, but primarily Gentile. And this guy comes rushing at Jesus, and there's this confrontation. The demons recognize who Jesus is, and he comes rushing at Jesus, and Jesus casts out the demons. They ask to be thrown into pigs. We'll talk about that a little bit. And the pigs throw themselves off the cliff and all die. And the people from the village have some questions about that. And then, so as he leaves there, as he's leaving there, this man, Jairus, who's a leader in the temple, one of the primary Jews, a leader in the Jewish community, a religious leader, comes up and says, "My daughter is at death's door," and there's a crowd with him. He's like, "Can you please come heal her?" And Jesus says yes, so they all start heading back to his house, and the crowd is following. And while this is happening, the passage that Danette read for us this morning, that this woman who had this probably some kind of uterine hemorrhage, comes up to him and just weaves her way through the crowd, and she's thinking, nothing has worked. It's been going on I'm just going to touch his garment. If I can touch his robe, then maybe something magical will happen and I'll be healed. And she does, and Jesus knows it in the middle of this huge crowd, and he talks to her, and she's actually healed, and he talks to her about that, and he says, "It's your faith that's healed you." And she goes away, and the disciples have some stuff to say about it. And then he finally gets to Jairus' home, and right before he gets there, the people come out, and they're like, "She's already dead. Tell him we don't need Jesus anymore." And Jesus goes, no, you don't get it. And they keep going, and the crowd kind of begins to be sarcastic, kind of condescending to Jesus, right? And so he goes inside, and the crowd is there, and they've got hot dish, and they're, trying to console the family, and he says, "Everybody out." He takes mom and dad and 3 of his disciples, and he goes in the room, and he raises this 12-year-old girl from the dead. 3 broken people. There's this guy who's possessed by a wad of demons. There's this 12-year-old girl who's dying. And there's this woman who has been afflicted for years and had no hope. Damaged people. And Jesus restores them to not only to health, but to him. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. So we start with 3 damaged people. And start here, I think on your sheet. Sorry, the verses I just used little snippets to kind of introduce you to these 3 damaged people. The first one, Jesus climbed out of the boat, and a man possessed by an evil spirit came out of the tombs to meet him. Let me read the whole thing for you. And if you have your Bibles, you can read along. So they arrived at the other side of the lake in the region of, I worked all last night learning how to pronounce this, Gerasnes. And that's not right, Gerasnes. And then Jesus climbed out of the boat. A man possessed by an evil spirit came out of the tombs to meet him. And the man lived in burial caves and could no longer be restrained, even with a chain. Whenever he was put into chains and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains from his wrists, smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Day and night he wandered among the caves and the burial caves and the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. When Jesus saw Jesus some distance away, the man saw him and ran to meet him, and he bowed down low before him. And some translations say worship, but I like this, that bowed down is probably a better way to say that everyone acknowledging who Jesus is not the same as worship. Maybe we need to remember that. Just acknowledging, saying the name, and even knowing who Jesus is not the same as worship. Anyway, with a shriek, he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High? In the name of God, I beg you don't torture me." For Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of the man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus demanded, "What is your name?" And he replied, "My name is Legion, because there are many of us inside this man." One translation called it mob. "My name is Mob. I am a mob of unclean spirits." Then the evil spirits begged him again and again not to send him into some distant place. This happened in a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. "Send us into those pigs," they begged. "Let us enter them." So Jesus gave them permission, and the evil spirits came out of the man and entered in the pigs. And a herd of 2,000 pigs plunged down a steep hillside into the lake and drowned in the water. Crazy story. What about this guy? So he was possessed by actual demons. And again, they're called unclean spirits is probably the best translation of that. These actual demons, there's a whole wad of them that were controlling this man, and he couldn't control himself. They were controlled by him, and their whole goal was to cause destruction and pain and chaos and mayhem. They were delighted by making him miserable. Sin is powerful. It's no accident that addictions and besetting sins or things that we struggle, whatever you want to call it, are called getting rid of your demons. When we talk about those sins that hold us, believe me, I understand that an addiction or any of that stuff can seem like a demon that is controlling us, and we feel like it shouldn't be, and we feel like we want to fix it and we can't. Whether it's drugs or alcohol, or foods or games or sex or rage or shopping or hoarding, whatever that thing is that seems to control us. What are our unclean spirits? What are your demons? What is controlling you? Probably more than one, to be honest. That was one of the hardest things for me to acknowledge. When I got clean from drugs, I still had a bunch of other problems. Some things all the reasons I took drugs. I was insecure. I'm controlling. I'm emotionally stunted. That's enough for now. But I find, I replaced it with food. I'm struggling with that now, right? But we probably have more than one. What is the mob? What is the legion that we struggle with? The result of sins that control us, besetting sins, struggles, is that they delight in making us miserable. That is the spiral, the classic addiction, destructive behavior struggle, that we sin, we think about sin, we are controlled by it, we act on it. It gives us a moment of relief or pleasure, and then we feel guilt, and then we are shamed out of guilt. Yes, I'm guilty, I did something wrong, and then Satan, and then we begin to shame ourselves rather than turn to God, and then we're miserable, and we have regret, and then all we want is relief. And what do we turn to? That demon that we know gives us a moment of relief. We cannot control our sin. That's one of the reasons I know we believe, and again, because of Jesus, we'll talk about that we have some hope, but on our own, we cannot control it. That's why step one in a 12-step program is admit that we are powerless over our addictions. And the question I always ask when someone's like, I can quit. No, I've got this, I'm a Christian, I shouldn't be addicted. I'm like, well, how's your plan working out? Oh, I guess I still struggle. We cannot manage our sin. We can only have it removed. We cannot minimize our demons. We can only have them removed. And those things hurt ourselves. The demoniac, the demons made him hurt himself, cast himself on the ground and find some sharp rock. Imagine the depravity and the pain and the misery he felt, that all he could do was grab a sharp rock and slash at himself. When we are controlled by our sin and compulsive behaviors, we ignore all restraints and all attempts to manage our sin. The next woman, the next person, the next damaged person, a woman in the crowd, had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. And like I said, it may have been a uterine hemorrhage. That's probably what most scholars think, that would have made her unclean for worship. Not only does this woman have this disease, this physical pain, but she was not allowed to have spiritual community. How damaging emotionally, as well as physically, as well as spiritually, as well as just in her community, to be left alone and told you're unclean by something you can't control. But most of all, worse than all that, or in the middle of all that, it was incurable. We're going to talk in a minute. She tried all sorts of stuff. She tried everything that was available. She tried every medical, spiritual, essential oil, whatever it is, she tried, literally, and nothing worked. She was hopeless, almost. And then there's Jairus. Starts here, and we'll start in verse 23. We'll actually start up a little bit before, but yours starts in 23. Jesus got out of the boat again and went back to the other side of the lake, where a large crowd had gathered. When he got in the boat, was to be away from the large crowd. And even the storm didn't drive him away. And there they are. He gets out of the boat. On the other side of the land, there's a large crowd gathered around the shore. And the leader of the local synagogue, whose name was Jairus, arrived. And when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. Again, worship, recognition, hope, we don't know. But he falls at his feet and he says, pleads fervently with him, my little daughter is dying. Please come and lay your hands on her. Heal her so she can live. And Jesus went with him. And all the crowd followed, crowding around him. It's daughter was ill to the point of death. He had no other option. Here he was, a leader in the synagogue, a leader of the religious group. He had access to all the help in the world. All the ritual cleaning, all the prayer, all the people. He was a leader, and all of his wealth, all of his influence, all of his power, all of his spirituality could not heal his daughter. And I'll say this, there are very few Jewish leaders who acknowledged Jesus' power. Here's one. The humility it takes for one of those guys to go to Jesus and say, I believe you can do something about this, is powerful. He was willing to leave what his community, what his crowd said is, this is the test of whether you're one of us or not. You've got to hate that guy. And publicly, with a crowd, go to Jesus. Because he had a broken, damaged daughter. And not only were these damaged people there, but they were failed by their communities. These three damaged people were failed by the people around them. The demoniac, the man living possessed by demons, the man lived in burial caves. It could no longer be restrained, even with a chain. Whenever he was put into chains and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains from his wrists and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. So he lives in a community, a little village over there. And all they could try and do, they did not know how to fix him. So horrible, so out of control, so clearly screwed up that all they tried to do is they thought maybe we can restrain him or maybe we can get him out of our sight. He didn't put himself in shackles. He didn't put himself in chains. His community realized they couldn't do anything more with him. So rather than deal with him, rather than find help, they just wrapped him up in chains and stuck him in the graveyard and thought, as long as he's there and not bothering us, we just don't want him upsetting our life. Destroyed by these demons, and the people didn't know how to deal with them. And they didn't know how to deal with pigs, raising pigs. And when the demons asked to be thrown into the pigs, I'll throw this out, that our unclean spirits, whether they're actual spirits in our lives, that we're in spiritual warfare, they're actual demons, or just the besetting sins in our life, they do not care. They think as much of us as they do pigs. They don't care if they're a human or a pig, as long as they can cause damage. And I'll admit, sometimes those besetting sins, we really love them. We think they're doing good stuff for us. And they don't care. But it's amazing what happens. So Jesus casts them in the pigs run over the cliff. The community comes back, right? They see the guy. When they come back, when the village comes up, they hear this guy's there, and Jesus is dealing with the demoniac. They hear because the swineherds had said, something weird just happened. And they all come out, and they see the demoniac there wearing actual clothes, sitting like a sane person, talking with Jesus and the disciples. At first they're amazed, and I like this, not that they're reverent, not that they're worshiping, not that they think it's great, they're just like, what? They saw that the guy that they couldn't control was in control of himself. And they're talking to Jesus, and then what happens? At first they're amazed, and they're like, and then they are terrified, then they are bothered, then they are disturbed, and they what's their response? Jesus, come heal all of us. Now their response is, Jesus, you need to get. One translation said, they demanded Jesus would leave. And I don't think they were afraid of his holiness. I don't think they were afraid of his power. I don't think they were afraid of his ability to heal. I think they were afraid of ruining their economy. They were more worried about losing money because they lost 2,000 pigs. I don't know how many drachma a pig goes for. But they lost a lot of money that day. And they're like, Jesus, that's just about enough of you. Their enthusiasm and excitement waned. They found exposure. They found being near Jesus awesome in a bad way. It was awe-inspiring and terrifying and changed their way of life. And they wanted nothing to do with it. Who are the damaged people that we would rather not deal with? Who in your life is the damaged person who's maybe got some really ugly sins that we have tried to control? We have told them the truth. We have given ultimatums. We have challenged them. We've read them Bible verses, and they still won't change. And all we care about is maybe making them act better. So let's put a chain around them and get them out of our sight. Are they addicts? Are they elderly? Are they people who have made poor choices? Are they people who are walking away from God? Are they people that we just want to get rid of and don't want to deal with because it's just too hard and they're just not making the change? And so, you know what? I don't want to deal with you anymore. We'd rather remove them from our field of vision than to deal with them. Because the way we manage and the way we've handled our life and the way that we're comfortable with doesn't work. And it just might take a miraculous connection with Jesus to do it, and we don't know how to make that happen. Now, please understand, I am not talking about wisdom. I get it. Sometimes there are legitimate times we need to have boundaries and reasons, but we should never slam the door. We should never send Jesus away because his healing somebody might be out of our control and too difficult. If I have one message, and whenever I'm asked to talk about addiction and families of addiction, and even the whole book we wrote was basically saying this: never slam the door. The number one indicator that someone's going to get clean and stay clean is a compassionate community. And I get, sometimes that means you can't have them stay in your house. Sometimes that means you don't give them, I'm not talking about those details. I'm just talking about when we get tired of it and we're sick and tired of it and we're like, finally, this is it. Don't ever come around anymore. That leads to hopelessness. We're failing as a community for people who, and I'm not just talking about addiction, but any of those sins we just can't deal with, or any of that stuff that's just too much for us to deal with. It's not what Jesus calls us to do. All too often it's not about our comfort level, not my conscience, not what I can do, but what I want to do. Who's the person that we just can't deal with? And thirdly, community that failed, secondly, I'll get through these quick, I promise. Not quick, but we'll get through them. Sorry, I get excited. This woman, she suffered a great deal. So remember, she'd had this for 12 years, this bleeding, and she touched Jesus. But before that, she had suffered a great deal from many doctors. And over the years, she had spent everything she had to pay them, but she had gotten no better. In fact, she'd gotten worse. She had gone to doctors and healers and everyone around, and desperate to get help. She paid them money. She gave them everything she had, begging for every opportunity, and none of them helped her. And it seems to show not only did they not help her, they were taking advantage of her. She was in crisis. They saw her as an opportunity to expand their power and their wealth, to advance themselves and their agenda, and they took advantage. They did not care about the person. They cared about the situation. I think about this sometimes, and this is probably a stretch, but just a thought. I worry sometimes for when Christians delight in crisis, that I think we need to be really careful about when someone's having a crisis, that we're only excited because we get to share Jesus. Should we share Jesus? Absolutely. But we need to care about that person first. Sometimes we make our love for people contingent on them converting. So whether you're changing a tire or going to the hospital to meet with somebody, or helping a neighbor in a divorce, or taking a meal to somebody who's struggling in your community, do that anyway and share Jesus when we can. We need to earn it sometimes. Jesus healed with no strings attached. He loved to heal people. We need to do the same. And now back to Jairus. While he was still speaking to her, messengers arrived, so they're heading back to the house, the 12-year-old. Her messengers arrived from the home of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue, and they told him, your daughter is dead. There's no use troubling the teacher now. And then it says that Jesus overheard them, and he said to Jairus, don't be afraid, just have faith. And Jesus stopped the crowd and wouldn't let anyone go with him except for Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And they came to the home of the synagogue leader. And Jesus saw much commotion and weeping and wailing, the sympathy cards, the flowers, the casseroles, all that stuff, platitudes and cliches. And he went inside and asked, "Why is all this commotion and weeping? The child isn't dead, she's only asleep." Because he knew what he was going to do, right? But get a load of this. When they hear that, they say, the crowd laughed at him. But he made them all leave, and he took the girl's father and mother and the disciples into the room where the girl was lying. I love that when the religious leaders run up, they have no faith or understanding about what they're doing. They didn't really think Jesus was going to be able to do anything. And even if he did, they had this limit to what their faith would allow. They saw Jesus, the girl was dead, they were done. They said, yeah, forget the teacher then, it's pointless. And the crowd that was following was there for the show. They loved to see the healings, right? They're like, oh, no, what we care about is healing. Oh, the show's off, it's canceled, she died. All right, let her go home. But Jesus had offered hope instead. He said, they don't really understand, they don't get it. Have faith, trust me. And the people were pessimists. The crowd was pessimists because they hadn't seen the results of faith. Jesus' message to that pessimist crowd was, get out, leave us alone, we're going to take care of this. And Jairus was humble enough to continue to follow Jesus. I love that. He's continue to follow him. They're like, okay, you know what? This doesn't make sense. Everyone else is mocking us, literally making fun of Jesus, and we're going to follow him. They were willing to go against the grain of the voices around them and go ahead and continue to follow Jesus with that little crowd into the girl's room. So I want us to think about when we evaluate damaged people and damage within ourselves, do we have faith? Are we really willing to follow Jesus all the way when it's beyond what we asked for, when it's beyond what we understand, when it's beyond what we could fix before, when it's beyond what's reasonable? When we ask for peace that passes understanding, are we really trusting that Jesus can give us peace that doesn't make sense? Or are we asking for him to give us a circumstance that allows us to have peace that makes sense? How do we limit our faith? Can we be an optimist in the face of difficult times? But then, of course, Jesus wins. Point 3, these 3 people that were damaged and let down by their communities are now restored by Jesus. And I love this. So Jesus already healed the demoniac, cast out the demons. The pigs ran into the ocean. And he'd already showed this radical change in his life already in just a few minutes, right? He put on clothes. That's a good start, right? To show that you've changed. Quit cutting himself. And his response to Jesus is awe. Then this happens. He has another request. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Begged to go with him. But Jesus says, no, go home to your family and tell them everything the Lord has done for you and how merciful he's been. I kind of don't blame him. He'd been living this miserable life, tormented. And the people around him, all they did was wrap him up in chains and make him live in the tombs. I think I'd rather hang out with Jesus and the disciples. But Jesus says, no. No, you need to go back. You need to live here in this community. You need to stay with those people and show them every day by the fact that you exist how a life can be changed because of me. Show them how it is to be really free. And he stayed, and he taught. And it says he shared with the people of the 10 villages. What an amazing testimony. I'll tell you what, that is the best Christian ever. The one who was the worst Christian ever, the worst person ever, been controlled by demons, controlled by sin, causing mayhem and chaos. And when he got better, he was willing to share that with the people that had hurt him before. And that was his life's mission. I'll bet that testimony over time was better than all the best theology in the world. His life was a better sermon than this one, if you can imagine. Right? He wanted to go with Jesus, and Jesus said, no, I have a mission for you. To share what's happened with these people. And then Jesus goes into the house. I'm sorry, then this woman who had the hemorrhaging had heard about Jesus, and somebody somewhere told her about him, right? So she followed, she works her way up there, and she touches his garment, right? And she's healed. And I love Jesus knows something's happened, and he says to the disciples, it says in some translations he felt energy, but whatever that was, he knew someone had been healed, and she knew she was healed at that moment. And I don't know whether she was shy or whatever, but Jesus said, somebody's touching me. And I love the disciples like, there's this huge crowd, Jesus, everybody's touching you. You know what's amazing to me, though, is that not everybody who touched him was healed. Not everyone who touched him, suddenly whatever was going on with him got better. But hers did. Why? Because she worked hard and she had faith. I love this, that she worked hard, she reached out, she took her hopelessness and had hope in one last shot, one last thing, one last person, the Son of Man who came to serve. She trusted that Jesus was the actual answer, and she reached out to Jesus. She knew this person wasn't like the doctors or the other religious leaders that were there to take from her. Here was somebody who was purely there to heal her. And Jesus turns around and says, it's okay. Your faith, your willingness to reach out has healed you. Jesus isn't living in the flesh with us. He's with us. He's within us. He empowers us today. You know what? When someone's reaching out for Jesus, we might be the ones who have to reach back to them. We need to find those people who are hurting and damaged and lonely and care for them. Let's help their faith come to fruition and see their lives and their hearts and their pain healed. And then lastly, the little girl. Holding her hand, he said to her, Talitha koum, which means little girl, get up. And the little girl, who was 12 years old, immediately stood up and walked around, and they were overwhelmed and totally amazed. And I like this little last part. And Jesus said, don't tell anybody what's happened in here. And then they went and told, just like every single person who's ever healed, right? And they told, and then they said, and give her something to eat. Because 12-year-olds, regardless, boys or girls, are hungry, especially when they've been dead for a while. That takes a lot out of you. Jesus has power over death. They got to watch this happen. And the people that watched it, the friends and the church, the religious leaders and the people were overwhelmed. They were blown away. They could not comprehend that we knew she was dead and now she's alive and she's having a snack because Jesus healed him. I love that. You've heard me say this before, and I mean it. You are the miracle that can show people this power. You have gone from death to life. You need to show that. Show the skeptics, show the pessimists, show the leaders, people who are watching, show them how you've become alive. Live a life that's close to Jesus. Live a life that is caring and healed, and share how you got that way. So how do we do this? How do we turn to Jesus? We reach out to him. We pray. We engage with others who are trying to follow Jesus for the purpose of growing closer to him. We listen for the voice of Jesus and for the Spirit to prompt us. We read his word and ask him to expose himself to us through that. We want to obey him, and when we learn something, no matter what the cost is, that we're going to follow his new command. We're going to follow his law to love people, even if they're unlovely, even if they're uncontrollable, even if they are in some sin that we can't handle, that we share the love of Jesus with them. We don't try and just get past it. We try and love. And we share that with the people around us. Our lives were damaged, and the people around us didn't come through, and Jesus finally did. We are those people. We're going to take a little break from Mark. After this, we'll have Peter come up and do a song here in a minute. But we're going to take a little break. We start, can you believe this? We start Advent next week. I think it's time for those of your friends and family who watching commercials. Some people started putting up trees right after Halloween. I would invite you back. Invite them with you. Let's celebrate this season. Let's celebrate Advent. We're talking about joy next week. Or no, I'm sorry, next week is hope. We're going to be talking about hope. Man, we all need hope, especially today. So I want you to come back and enjoy that with this week. We're going to come back to Mark, I promise, but we're going to take a little break and talk about Advent and hope. Peter, do you want to play?
Would you guys stand for our last song? Praise is rising, eyes are turning to you. We turn to you. Hope is stirring, hearts are yearning for you. We long for you, 'cause when we see you, we find strength to face the day. And in your presence, all our fears are washed away, washed away. Hosanna, Hosanna, you are the God who saves us, worthy of all our praises. Hosanna, Hosanna, come have your way among us. We welcome you here, Lord Jesus. Hear the sounds of hearts returning to you. We turn to you. In your kingdom, broken lives are made new. You make us new. When we see, 'cause when we see you, we find strength to face the day. And in your presence, all our fears are washed away, washed away. And Hosanna, Hosanna, you are the God who saves us, worthy of all our praises. And Hosanna, Hosanna, come have your way among us. We welcome you here, Lord Jesus.
So Mark 5:20. So the man started off to visit the 10 towns of that region and began to proclaim the great things Jesus had done for him. And everyone was amazed at what he told them. May we be people who reach out to Jesus for the healing of our damaged lives and then share his grace and restoration with everyone we meet. Have a fantastic Thanksgiving. Have a fantastic week. And we will see you, hopefully, for Hope next Sunday.